Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 349 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we're going to build a self-contained plastic setup that will make plastic from oil. Enjoy. So let's just go down the list. There is a logical order to all of this, but we'll just go down the list and follow it. I guess I'll go from left to right, where the final step is simply 2 assembling machines taking in the liquid plastic. And then the next step, we're actually using 2 different methods of plastic because we have 2 tiers. The first tier uses propane gas, and that's what we're doing now. And of course, that is a gas product. The second one uses naphtha, so that is a liquid product. But to make naphtha, we can also make the propane. So that's why this setup is so complicated, is because it's condensing the full output of all of the oil into making plastic. So we're actually doing both methods of liquid plastic here. And they're both huge. Full productivity, because it just makes the setup smaller, even though it does add pollution. And this one is 44.5, so because these are so big, we should probably build them first. But also, we should be checking how much actual electricity and pollution is created on these setups now. It's clearly a problem. But it's 250 megajoules for this whole thing, and 78 pollution a second. And 78 sounds like a lot, but compared to batteries, it isn't. So it's actually reasonably efficient, because most of these machines are so fast, we only need one of them. So let's do the 2 plastics, because they feed in, and neither of them have priority, they just run as they can. So that's all of the output, and then the inputs will need to come from this side. I guess I should cover that. The actual recipe requires naphtha and polyethylene, and that's for the liquids. Fortunately, it's all gray. I'm not sure why. Actually connect the pipes, perhaps? Well, maybe they're just gray. That would be kind of obnoxious if that was the case. But we'll probably just plop some substations in here because they're so big. So the other way, which is down here, uses liquefiers instead, and more productivities to get as much as we can out of it, because everything else in this setup is dumped into this step. So if there's one thing you can reduce, it's this. It's also the only machines in this whole setup that could even use productivities to begin with, so might as well. Let's see, can we take this out and still have everything reach? Of course we can. And that plutonium is lasting a really long time. That every time this runs, this number only goes down by 1. And remember, that's 55.0. So it's 55.0, 54.0, and it lasts a long time. So we have an awful lot of fuel in plutonium right now. Alright, well, this one could probably be bigger than this, but it's also simpler, because they can all just be feeding directly into each other. And since they're going to be right next to each other with no inputs or outputs, besides the pipes, we can just throw those in there. But this recipe is just propane gas goes in and we get liquid plastic out. Now that we're making a final shape, try to line it up. So that's where the machines are. We'll give it, there's no reason to make it that small with 1 space, because then doing anything with pipes in the middle would be super annoying. Let's give it 2 spaces. So the output is taken care of, and now we have 2 chains to follow. Well, let's go the normal way, because essentially the plastics from gas is the byproduct way. We're just using that to reduce the amount of total resources that need to go in. Ultimately, the controlling factor is the naphtha that we need. However, this is basically the beginning of the chain. So instead, we probably want to find something else, such as the polyethylene, because this is the only thing that it goes into, and it's this one right here. So we'll know we're done when all the pipes are connected and we don't have anything else to add. So this is only going to require 1 machine to feed all of this. This is something that's going to need catalysts, and the assembling machine is nice and slow. This one needed a speed module to get below 1, but then in its extra slots we canceled the speed module with 2 efficiencies and then threw a pollution cleaning in there to where it's negative on pollution neutral in energy and it's faster, so it's still better than the alternative there. So this recipe needs its catalyst and ethylene gas. And ethylene is produced from ethane. And we do need 3 steam crackers for this. Luckily, only 1 gas goes in, so we don't need to leave too much space in here. Just what's necessary for the pipes. And it will create some residual gas, but lots of things are going to do that, and we need every bit of that residual gas for this setup to work correctly. So to remind me that it's there, let's do a little pipeline up there to get our attention. And the input is simply steam. And instead of having a steam pipe going all over the place, which that's actually something that hasn't been calculated in this energy consumption, is the fact we need a whole bunch of boilers to do that. So it's actually going to take a lot more energy than it appears. But calculating boilers in Hellmod is kind of weird, but we can still kind of roughly calculate that in a second here. I don't know if there's a better way of placing a ghost down that you don't have direct access to in your inventory here. So what I've been doing is just taking an extra slot here, selecting it, then it creates a ghost, which we can then place in here, like that. I don't know if there's a better way to do that. Is this the kind of thing where we're just not making very many boilers, or are we making any of them? I guess not. Well, we should make them, because we're actually going to need quite a few. Alright, let's pick a spot. I mean, we could do it anywhere, but a lot of this stuff kind of feeds into itself, so we kind of don't want to. But how about below the pump here, because that's the last tier of pump. So we know nothing would go below it. Like, looking right here might be nice, but we're going to have more laser turrets, so we don't want to do that. Let's get rid of those. You see, we are building up stone again. It does build up quickly, but it's just not reliable enough for the quantity of plastic that we're going to need to make. There we go. And research is definitely happening here. Well, we have 2 options. We can use purified water or regular water. Might as well use regular water. And one important thing to note is that the steam engines only make 165 degree steam, probably to prevent you from doing a power loop where you make power with this and then put it in a turbine. But nonetheless, like, this thing uses 1.88 megawatts. Well, if we put an efficiency in, now it's 363. I think for this situation, efficiency modules are just straight up broken and just really immersion breaking, because boiling water straight up takes energy. You can't cheat physics there. There are certainly slightly more efficient ways of heating water, but I don't think you're going to reduce the energy consumption of an electric boiler by 80%. Unless it's space magic. So I'm not going to use those. Probably speed modules. But let's see what 1 would give us. So 1 would give us 60. So let's kind of calculate this here. That if we need 18, 64, and each one does 60, we would need 31.07, and each one is 1.88 megawatts. That would be 58 megawatts in addition to what we're doing here, so it's actually not insane. That would actually significantly add to the pollution that this does. And since these boilers are small and we can place them anywhere, why not just put pollution cleanings in there and call it a day? We'll see. Some of the bigger setups might need more, but since we need 199, that means we're going to need 4 of these. And I believe it needs the same quantity of water. Yes. Water is a 1-to-1 ratio, and I think pump jacks are something that we don't have automated yet because of how many steps were involved. But because we're building a lot of these, we should probably automate them because they are more energy efficient the higher up you go. Unfortunately, that means we have to do 5 tiers of them. But let's just do another line here. I wish we could jump into tier 8 modules. But we are waiting on the research. But it would kind of suck to go straight into modules and then find out we don't have enough plastic. So I'm not sure exactly how much plastic it would take. But the fact that we're running so low on stone has me concerned. And we've got our pump jacks. Let's just grab the 10 of them for now so I have something to work with. So we're going to need 200 water, but each one of these pump jacks does 750. So that is not going to be a concern. We'll just pipe it in right at the top. Well, now we got to follow it down the chain that we need ethane. So which setup made that? It actually comes from two sources. The secondary source is us processing the raw gas, but the primary source is processing a bunch of synthesis gas. And we should probably do the synthesis one because that also requires the same two ores. So it would just mean less belts if we did this one. Alright, we need 5.01 unfortunately, and I am going to do the 01. We need the catalyst and a synthesis gas, and a lot of it in this case, and some hydrogen, which is where most of that hydrogen requirement comes from. And basically, it allows us to just make gases. Unfortunately, it only makes a little bit of the ethane, but it's actually not a problem because all of that methane is also being turned into plastic. So the only waste here is butane. Doing pipes like this is always kind of annoying because it's a super dense way of doing it. But they're in there, and I don't know. Maybe a pipe visualizer only shows what's actually in there. It doesn't show if it's empty, but I feel like that's different functionality than it had before. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see anything in the settings. And the hover over doesn't work either, so that's kind of annoying. But anyway, Factorio let us hook up the pipe, so they must be good. So now we have something. And we can make 6 of them. Let's just make the one that sticks out at the top. Hydrogen is going to need to come from somewhere. We do make some of it in this build, but not much. It's probably not going to come from the center. And we're going to need some space for like a pipe bus of sorts for all these resources to get moved around. So let's do this for now, where we have our hydrogen and also the synth gas. And let's just do that pipe right there to mark that. And I wish Pipe Visualizer would have colors. Also, we have our 2 other outputs. We have this one and like that one. The methane and the butane. Okay, well that's probably the end of that path, because now we would need to do the oil processing and all of the tiny single machines that go with it. So we actually have 2 different sources of propane here. The primary one is cracking the methane gas into propane, and that's where a lot of the steam comes from, because we're going to have a lot of methane. However, we're also going to get a little bit of propane here from carbon dioxide. But since we don't have any of the carbon dioxide left, and that's a small setup, let's do the traditional way, the one we're currently doing at Green Algae, which has 2 steps. First, the methane is cracked into methanol, and then that methanol is cracked into propane, and both steps will make residual gas, which we will need for later. But there is a residual gas pipe right here, so it would be nice if they were lined up with these machines. And they might be. So let's line the output pipe, like right there. Get rid of these. And there we go, put these down in their place. And because these 2 are so close to each other, including these other ones, we might be able to have a much bigger steam setup that just powers all of these rather than having these little lines in. So we'll have to see the total number of boilers and how much steam we're dealing with, because we're looking at about a pipe's worth for all of this, so it's getting kind of close. But that output will go straight through. Well, since nothing is probably going on the end here, let's just line them up and put some spaces in there for pipes and whatnot. Well, that was longer than I was thinking it would be. So let's cut out half of them and like smash them in there. Because actually these machines can be incredibly dense. Well, that takes care of one of those, so we don't need this reminder anymore. Well, besides the residual gases, the other thing we need to handle is technically the butane, but that's just going to get burned, so it basically doesn't matter where that happens. Well, from here, I guess we'll process the raw gas because that's also going to create R3 gases, so we can pipe that into the other setup. And it's not going to be very big. Just one machine into one machine. So I almost wonder if we can just kind of hook it up. Would all the pipes match? Although, that's wrong. It's using the original gas refinery, but it has to be in the advanced gas refinery, I believe. Doing that changes the modules a little bit. We need a speed module to get it below 1, and then an efficiency module to try to make up for it. So it kind of works, but it also has that gas in there, and it's just a bigger machine. So I'm actually going to do it on the end here and just swing the pipes up and over. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this is the advanced version of gas fractioning. So we have a couple choices. We can do the normal fractioning that just gives you the 50, 30, 20 split of the resources. Or you could do an advanced version that throws an extra resource in there and then buffs one of the other resources. So in this case, we put 50 synthesis gas in there, and it increases the methane output from 50 to 90. And also we get some carbon monoxide. We can do the heavy gas fractioning, which will buff butane and give us some naphtha and require gas condensates. Or the medium one that kind of buffs all of them. It's kind of weird. So instead of 50, 30, 20, it's 40, 40, 50 in toluene. But again, toluene isn't very useful. And of those, light fractioning makes the most sense because the light output is what goes into plastic. So we want as much of the light stuff as we can get. So that's why we're using that version. So the light gases are coming down here to get cracked into propene. The medium gases are being sent here to be cracked into polyethylene. And then the heavy gases is the butane that we can't do anything with. So we're just stuck with it. We also want to leave space here because we're probably going to need underflow and overflow valves and perhaps tanks and logic to make all this work correctly. So space is definitely useful. Well, now we need to handle the raw gas in the very typical way. Let's just put it 3 away so we can have a walking gap. And then the acid gas, but the acid gas is going to be a straight up byproduct that's going to be sent on a drone. So this one is essentially done. So I kind of want to mark it as done by, let's say, doing a square to say that one, it's technically not going to anything, but it needs to be a drone. So that is complete. Well, now that we can handle the raw gas, we can do the setup that makes it. So this is where it all starts. But let's do the raw gas first, since it's just going to be a straight line. And that's always nice. So raw gas goes straight through. We're going to get our crude. And also some sulfuric wastewater. So let's just move each of those in their own directions. Well, and in here just goes the multi-phase oil. So let's do another square to show that that part is complete. So the crude comes down, and we are using a special way of processing the crude. And luckily all these machines are just 1 into 1 into 1. So it's kind of funny that all this cracking takes all this space, but just processing the basic oil is quite dense. So let's cover that when dealing with crude oil, you also kind of have the choice of the standard way or focusing on light, medium, or heavy resources. Standard way is 20, 30, 50. Well, you can do light by adding hydrogen gas and focusing on naphtha. And since naphtha is what we need for plastic, that's what we want to do. But if you wanted to pull it down towards the middle, you can add the condensates to it. Or if you want to pull it towards the heavy end of mineral oil, you can add residual gas. A couple of outputs, and the naphtha is going to have a long way to go. Luckily, these aren't used in any complicated way. They just go straight to where they're needed. So the naphtha is going to have to go boom right through here. And we do have a pipe right here, so well, actually perhaps it could just jump over everything. Let's see, would this work? Well, these pipes are huge, so maybe. Would you look at that? It does. So we can get rid of this reminder now. And because lining up pipes is awesome, let's just put this one space down so the naphtha can go straight through. So we are starting to clear up all these resources. In fact, butane, we can also do the square because it's just going to get burned. So even though it's not going anywhere, we know where we want it to go. So now we're left with the fuel oil and the mineral oil, and we certainly could use those in the factory, but in effort to make this setup as closed loop as possible and to not rely on the rest of the factory, it just cracks both of those into residual gas and synthesis gas, since we needed that for a bunch of other stuff. That was essentially a limiting factor, was the huge amount of synthesis gas that we needed. So ultimately that's what we were using it for. And both of these setups are essentially identical. And let's just take the middle and we'll put them right next to each other. And then switch this one over to the mineral oil. There's probably one other thing that needs a huge amount of steam that I'm not thinking about. Oh yeah, there's little bits that are used here and there. So I already did the 1200. The big one is cracking this residual gas down. Well, we might as well do that then, since we are here. Requires 4 of these now. The synthesis gas will line up. So now the residual gas is taken care of, and we're definitely going to need some kind of tanks or something in here. But basically, once we've got the whole thing down, we can follow the chain from the beginning and then figure out what needs to be where. Well, since we're dealing with steam stuff, let's see if we can find the other steam things. We need to crack the oil residuals into residual gas. So let's handle that real quick. It's just one machine. And since the oil residuals will be coming out of this one, if we put it right next door, we should be able to make it work. But we don't want the pipes to match up incorrectly here. So how about we do this, and we'll just have a little line there getting rid of the oil residuals, and that's the only solid product out of here. So we could send them to the science bus, but why deal with those logistics when we can just fix it right here? Another steam thing is this coal cracking process, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that because I'm sure it'll be wrong to somebody. So we're going to crack coal is what we're doing here, where oxygen and the coal goes in and some steam, and we get some hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide, but mainly we just get synthesis gas. And this is the process that's going to top up anything we don't get otherwise. So we're definitely going to want to have valves on this. That steam is annoyingly right there, so we'll have to deal with it. Let's just do a squiggly to remind ourselves that we need to. And the same here. And this will have an input of coal, which will require 2 inserters and a yellow belt. Now we're kind of just getting into the weeds of all of the random byproducts that need to be handled to make this closed loop. Well, we have an output of carbon dioxide. And go down the list and find out what carbon dioxide goes into. It's the next step here. So we'll just grab it. It's a 2-step process. Carbon dioxide and hydrogen go in to make methanol. And then that methanol gets cracked in a steam cracker. But we already have these 3 up here. I wonder, can we combine it and just not use that extra one? I guess it depends on how many of them we have. It absolutely would fit. So for the math on HellMod to work, we can't really change where these are. I was very particular the way I had to set all this up to make the numbers look right. But just know that since the numbers are small, that we don't need to worry about that part. We just need to move the resources down. It would certainly simplify all of the pipes. This does create the hydrogen sulfide gas, but we'll take care of that. And hey, we're getting the research done, slowly but surely. Now it's time for adding the pollution cleanings in there. And then that'll be it for the main modules. And I'm actually thinking of removing the agricultural modules just because they have no disadvantage whatsoever. They're limited in their effect in that they only go into farms, but still, plus pollution, so in other words, it removes pollution, and plus productivity, but no slowdown. They're just better. So it would require going around the farms and kind of deciding what modules the farm should get, but I'm thinking of removing that, so I will uninstall it later. But this will finish us up for all of the research we need for modules. So by the time we're done with this plastic, that research will probably also be done, so oh well. And we're going down the list of byproducts. Now we have this hydrogen sulfide gas, which is right here. It's just the normal way of making sulfur, and it would be easier to transport this by sulfur because it's so much denser than by gas. And we also need oxygen, which is also required for the cracking of the coal, which is right here. Fortunately, the pipes aren't quite lined up where I'd like them to be, but let's just put it in the corner here. The oxygen pipe would go through. It still needs to be hooked up to something. Man, I really hope all this works. This is probably one of the most complicated builds we've done up until this point, at least with the number of steps that are involved. Now what do we want to deal with? We've got some carbon monoxide up here. So what's it getting used for? Turned into synthesis gas. Very small machine, but it could basically just fit up here since it'll be right next to everything else that it would need. What about the sulfuric wastewater? Well, same way it's always taken care of with the hydro plant. So put it right there. It has some mineralized water, which is the final output. And then purified water. And also a tiny bit of sulfur. Well, the steam is right there. And it can totally fit in. So now we don't need that reminder. We're still waiting on oxygen and the purified water. So the purified water is being electrolyzed into oxygen and hydrogen, which helps us, but it's not enough. And we need to offset that with just some hydro plants. So let's handle this. 2 electrolyzers. Since the water is over here, I guess we will kind of line that up. So we need 1 more water plant to fill up on it. And let's just put it right here because it would line up if we did. Although, I actually want to be careful where we put this. Let's give it a space. We might as well start concerning ourselves with logic now. We always need to leave room for this to run. This only tops up. And that output goes to where it needs to. This needs 427 water, which is 1 pump jack. Okay, is that everything? I hope it's everything. But unfortunately, testing it is going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.